whose opinions matter to you? Because if you are taking what everybody says as sort of gospel or as something to read into about you, which is what I naturally do, you aren't going to find a good answer, because everybody is going to think something completely different of you, depending on how much they know you, depending on what standard they're judging you by, depending on what they value, all of that. And if you read into everything that people say about you, then you aren't going to get a clearer picture of you. You're in fact going to get a more convoluted and diluted picture of you. So ask yourself, what standards do you want to measure yourself by? And in my opinion, those standards should be your own standards. So if you know what your standards are, really, does that mean that the only person you should ever listen to is yourself? No, I don't think that's true. But I do think that it's healthy for some opinions of you to hold more weight than others. And I do think that it's healthy for some of us to put our blinders on to some feedback that just isn't relevant. Not that their opinion can't be valid in some way, but it's not relevant to you because it doesn't either apply to you, or it doesn't apply to your standards, or they're judging you by a standard that you don't care to live up to and that you weren't trying to. It would be like if you were a doctor and somebody had you take the bar exam to practice law, and they were judging you as a bad lawyer, and you're like, I'm not a lawyer, I'm a doctor. You know what I mean? That's like a weird example, but I think that social standards and values can be similar, where we're judging people by our own standards at all times. And then when somebody doesn't meet the standard, you might think they're bad, when really they're just probably a different person. And that's just how it is. Because even though we're all one, we are all unique as well. And I think we have to learn to be more forgiving and let things roll off the back a little bit more when these things happen. But also, if somebody is judging you by standards that are not your own, it might be completely irrelevant feedback. And it's on you to decide and to discern what feedback is relevant and what feedback is irrelevant. And, what was I saying? So I know Brene Brown, who is a researcher and social worker who has researched vulnerability. She says that you should take a Post-it note and write down on that Post-it note the people whose opinions matter to you. And actually, I'm going to look up a quote to share to go along with this video. But I like that Brene Brown said that, because that was crazy to me, because a Post-it note can't hold that many people on there. And typically I try and, consider everything. But if you're considering everything, then it's really hard to execute based on your own standards and be your own person, because it's like with the doctor and the lawyer thing. If you're studying to become a lawyer, you shouldn't be judged by the doctor's standards and things like that. And if you're trying to be everything to everybody, then you're going to have a really hard time being somebody. And what you should do, in my opinion, is to be somebody, to be the best somebody that you could be, which is you and your standards. So I'm going to finish this off with a quote by Theodore Roosevelt, which is called "The Man in the Arena. It's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat. So when I say it's not the critic who counts, this is, when Theodore Roosevelt says that, it is pretty much saying that if somebody is trying to judge you by a different standard than your own standards, then it's not going to count. What counts is you being the best you could be. And there comes a point when listening to feedback can actually prevent you from being the best you could be. And so we have to discern, is this relevant to me or is it not relevant? So, and that's going to be different for everybody, because someone's opinion might apply to you, but it might not apply. It might apply to somebody else, but it might not apply to you. Who are you? And that's on you to know. It's on you to discern, it's on you to feel, and it's on you to decide where you want to go. So, gotta start taking some things with a grain of salt. And if you feel like the feedback of others is holding you back, then maybe you should not, maybe it's not relevant to you. So, and I know some might be worried that that could just be deflecting feedback. But I mean, I don't think we should be cherry picking feedback. And it's not like we should only be listening to ourselves. And, we don't want to be in sort of a confirmation bias or an echo chamber, but at the same time, like, who's the sort of person that you would hate to disappoint? Like maybe someone you look up to, or maybe a close friend, someone who you really, really admire. Like, don't disappoint them. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not just saying like that to avoid criticism, but there comes a point when listening to too much criticism like is irrelevant and can cause a lot of just unnecessary noise in your brain that literally prevents you from being the best somebody you could be. And so if you can, like for me, it might just be like, what would Brene Brown do? What would Gary Vaynerchuk do? What would Marie Forleo do? What would Oprah do? Some people say, what would Jesus do? Judge yourself by the standards of people that you admire, and listen more closely to the opinions of people in your life that you admire. And it's okay to weed out the irrelevant feedback, especially if weeding out the irrelevant feedback is helpful for you to be the best person that you could be. So thank you for watching and have a wonderful rest of your day.